Neil was quite an unconventional person, and he really did not want a conventional funeral, which he really saw as very much a production line.
I felt very stunned at the time. I felt, well, I've done everything I can for him. 4 days after Dennis died, I found out about green burials.
There's now a choice between being buried in a public cemetery and being buried in a wild place. And that wild place, a nature reserve possibly, could be a woodland, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a pasture, it could be anywhere else in the wild.
We realised that there was a revolution in the funeral industry that needs to happen. It wasn't just a question of a good sort of business idea. This was something that really the public needed.
Neil had been having cancer treatment for about 18 months, and we had reached the point where he had been told he was probably going to die. One thing that had been very important to him through the whole process was to keep some control over the situation in whatever ways he could.
Some people say it's a break of tradition. It's actually going back to the traditional way of funerals. Pre-Victorian times, the families did this. People would wheel their loved ones down to the local cemetery in the villages. It was all done within the community. We're trying to bring it back to the families. This is why bereavement counsellors are on the up in this country, because there is a problem. The whole thing is taken out of the family's hand and the funeral directors take over.
The reason Neil didn't want us to use a funeral director was partly commercial, in the sense that he felt funeral directors make a lot of money, perhaps unnecessarily in some people's view, and it would have seemed very wrong somehow for us not to have been involved at the final stage of planning and being involved in his funeral as well.
When someone goes through an emotional crisis, it's very important to actually face up to that crisis, face up to the pain and deal with it. The important thing is that people take control and not hand control to other people.
On the day John arrived at the pasture with Dennis in the cardboard coffin, covered with a green cloth and just a few family flowers on the top, my daughters and their partners went over and they carried the cardboard coffin over to the grave.
People feel within their funeral that a lot goes to waste. Fancy coffins, fancy plastic handles. With a plain, simple cardboard coffin, it's disposable.
Cardboard coffins, if people want coffins, that is, they don't need to use them. But if they want to use coffins, cardboard coffins obviously save trees that would otherwise be felled in tropical rainforests particularly. So the less wood we consume, the better. I mean, what is the point of burying that woodland or burning it in crematoria? It's just pointless, and it's devastating.
And they've lowered Dennis into the grave. The children threw some grass into the grave to line it to make Grandad comfortable when he went in. And then they threw some wildflowers on the top.
There were no restrictions, there was no structure to follow, and it made it a very much more positive experience for everybody involved.
Much of the countryside in the UK has been devastated in recent years. For example, we've lost almost half of our ancient woodlands, 97% of our wildflower pastures.
The Woodland Burial Ground is not only a beautiful place to visit and a very special place, but there's also a sense that Neil's decision to be buried here means that he is part of something new being created. In time, a new woodland will evolve, which will encourage wildlife. There is a pond area, there will be trees planted, and it's a beautiful and peaceful place to come and visit.
Once the growing season started and the land's become saturated with water again, the trees are planted. Once the site's full, it will be handed to a wildlife trust, which means the trees are going to be protected forever.
We're running out of space in cities for public cemeteries. The answer is to move burial grounds into the countryside. One of the main concerns about cremation are the gases that are going up the flue. For example, dioxins, which are very toxic, and mercury from amalgam teeth fillings. That sort of problem isn't an issue with burials. People often think that the water supply will be affected, but in fact there's never been any evidence of that being a significant problem anywhere.
Some people think that our site is a non-religious, it is for non-religious people, but it isn't. It's for anybody. You know, we welcome anybody that comes. Some people bring guitars up. Some people have a party. Some people drink champagne and, you know, they bring the dogs or the children and stay all day, some of them.
I do come here quite regularly, and it's been interesting to see over the past 18 months how the burial ground has changed, how it's evolving, how the trees are growing, and to visualise how it's going to look in 5 years, 20 years, 200 years' time.
It's an ongoing system of regeneration, of regrowth. The plants come, grazing animals move in. It's the working ecosystem. This is what we're trying to create.
Having Dennis buried in the nature reserve, it's really helped me and my family to come to terms with bereavement, because we've got a purpose. His death has brought life to the environment.
Well, I've got my plot right down the bottom of the field there. I'm hoping to live a while yet, so hopefully I'll be right at the end there.